I take the opportunity to go back to what Delphine is doing for us. And Delphine is the lady that is on the back of a room that is drawing. You saw that from what she did this morning, she moved it a bit in the corridor. And the idea is that when you will go out and in of a room, you look at it, and if you feel that there are some missing elements, key messages, easier for them to see you and to get a discussion, a dialogue moving between them and the participants. I stop here.
Okay.
So we go for
maybe from
food.
Yes. The human dimension of food from the sea. So Daniel is going to be our rapporteur. Huh? Yes. Goes on the screen. Yes. It will go on the screen.
Okay.
So we had a good discussion on seafood, or food from the sea. So which is much more than fisheries and fishers, but start with fish and fishers. In a very summarized way, we covered many aspects. So what are the needs? Summarizing the needs is that responsible research, innovation, and ocean literacy should contribute to raise awareness about the role and values of fishers, including particularly the social and economic importance of small-scale fisheries, to rebalance that. It should contribute to address the needs for knowledge so that all individuals along the value chain, going on to the consumer, become actors of sustainable seafood supply. Co-creation, we should ensure to agree with all actors on channels needed for transversal collaboration and communication, and we should harness knowledge through vertical and horizontal interactions. Make a change. OL and RI should provide people not only with knowledge and awareness, but also with understanding of the actions they can take to make a change. Precondition, we should include more positive messages when communicated and work at creating trust between stakeholders. Policy opportunities, literacy be a requirement for each project.
So Pierre, maybe we can move to Manuel workshop.
Otherwise,
okay. So
if you can start.
Just while Olga puts up the conclusions of this workshop, I would like to say something that I liked very much. We started within Responsible, we are a responsible partner, to doing a key story for the Marina project, organized a regional workshop in Athens for this specific topic. And we ended up getting some very good results, which we communicated to the IMO. Implementation and a workshop in another project, and then the results went up to the policy. So most people are familiar, but ballast water is the water that ships pick up in one area or a port to maneuver their voyage. And when they unload their cargo, they also sometimes unload this ballast water in another port. And the problem is there is a lot of alien species or larvae or microeggs or plants, so you get either pollution in the reception port, or you get the introduction of new species which sometimes outcompete the local fauna and become invasive. So Olga, could you, so our key question was, how can we have a sustainable maritime transportation in view of this problem while sustaining good. So the needs and the demands, we kind of look at them from two perspectives. One is the science understanding, the needs for better science understanding, and the other is the needs for better market understanding. So on the science side, there is a need for more knowledge on the impact of invasive species. So we talk about invasive species. We are not 100% sure which are the drivers. Is it the maritime transportation, but also it's the corridors, the aquaculture. So maritime is a big vector here, but still we need more knowledge on the link between the invasive species and the vector, and on the impact of the invasive species as such, because citizens need to understand and become more aware of which are the long and future term, let's say, damage that invasive species can cause in an area. Also, there is a need for improved communication between the port authorities, the Ministries of Environment and the Ministries of Health. There is a need to really monitor invasive species and develop early warning systems which are open access, and citizen science comes into play here because it's very useful to use citizen science observatory. And also there is a big need to monitor the port facilities because in the ports we do not have very good knowledge of the bacteria or all the constituents in the waters in the port. So it's also really hard to track the changes. So we need some monitoring of the port water and the port facilities. On the market understanding, because this is the problem with ballast water management, we have the science and we have the market analysis. We have to enhance our market and economic understanding. We have to understand that port economies and the fees that the port charge really drive the vessels from one port to another. Also, we need to understand that there is a need to develop EU port standards because these are lacking. There is a need to understand that the costs should also be shared between ship owners and ports, because for the time being, there is the Ballast Water Management Convention, which came into force last year and 1.5 years ago, and basically requires the ship owners to bear all the costs and install expensive ballast water treatment management systems, which they feel it's not the costs are not equally shared, and they react, of course, to that. So there is a need also to understand the share between costs. On the, sorry, 2 more minutes. Yeah. Okay, one. Can we go to Q? Then just go quickly to the second question, Q2. Co-creating and sharing knowledge. We thought it's good to have a specific call to create a test of protocols and toolkits to standardize the TRLs of the ballast water treatment systems, create focal points shared between administration of port authorities and different ministries, citizen science observatory. Who can initiate and contribute the change? Well, institutions are not interested in change, so the change has to come and be initiated by the public. And preconditions are a lot, so I'll just flag the 2 more important ones. One important precondition is to have everybody learn about the costs of restoration. How much does it cost us to currently mitigate the problem of invasive species? One important precondition is also to train the crew, because crew on the ships is ignorant on how to use the system, and have a feedback loop between the treatment systems back to the innovators to really improve these systems in tested on voyage. Next one. Constraints and opportunities. MSFD provide an opportunity because it mentions yes, but still there is a gap. H20 DG environment calls could be a good opportunity, and the Joker message is be specific and hit some fingers. So I don't explain.
Okay, sorry, we don't have time to go deeper into the presentation, but thanks a lot. I think you were mentioning all the important things. So Manuel, your time now for the workshop for Marine Litter. The slides are ready.
Okay, the first thing I would like to say is that it's an interesting challenge to work with 20 people who to some extent don't know each other for 2.5 hours, so that's 45 to 50 hours of collective intelligence, The methodology had been designed in Italy with input from Spanish and French colleagues, and I can go on like that. I mean, it's really a very special exercise. The first sort of joker or meta message we had, if you can stay on the first slide, that would be wonderful. There we go. Is that there is a strong need for a systemic change. So we need to reflect on and change our production and consumption patterns. It's easily done, obviously, towards a circular economy where waste is an exception. And that, you know, this need for a systemic approach and a systemic change came again and again when we looked at each of the different questions we were discussing. Now we can go to the three different questions. So the first one about, including everyone's needs, etc. There is no one-size-fits-all approach, obviously, which means considering marine litter, if you look at different types of litter, obviously you have to look at different types of stakeholders, different types of geographical settings, different types of facts, etc. And the other thing is that you should, or we already tried, to bring together all stakeholders. In the workshop we had about all groups represented, except for very uninformed citizens. We didn't have them. So bringing in all stakeholders and nature, or biodiversity, or biosphere, or planet as a stakeholder. So that's something important and interesting to consider. If we look at sharing knowledge, we talked a lot about locally based inclusive processes, so bringing together different people, stakeholders, etc., and sharing what we call relevant knowledge, so at the same time scientifically sound, scientifically underpinned, but also customized to stakeholders. And then we came to making change. So there are different things. Obviously, if we talk about circular economy, very practical things such as new product design or monitoring the impact of what we're doing, etc. But more generally, it's true for that point, change, but it's true for everything. How can we foster behavioral change? Obviously, information isn't enough, and there's a typo there which shows it really isn't enough. Action is required, and you don't act only after having been informed. So we didn't come with the ideal or miracle solution for that. I think all of us have been working on that for months or years now, but it's really a major subject. Then we came to, if we can move to the following slide, we came to some opportunities. They are EU initiatives or policies in relation to plastic, or I should say no plastic, circular economy, etc. And they're not necessarily completely adapted at national level. So there are good opportunities to push some some actions forward, and at the same time talk and bring more change. And as a sort of broader frame, we were reminded that there will be a UN decade of ocean science for sustainable development, and that whatever we do should come under that sort of umbrella. Keys for success, so to co-design arenas for open dialogue, again, bringing together all stakeholders, sharing relevant knowledge, that was said, but there was this idea of really, mingling people and knowledge from different backgrounds. A professional bringing information to a decision maker, talking with scientists and going back to other professionals, etc. Plus working at the relevant level. There was this example of the water catchment. That's where a lot of pressures stem from, and that's also where we live and can act. And that's it. Thanks, Asha.
Thank you, Manuel, for your synthesis. Now we move to sustainable tourism. Alba Dastorina from Bloomhead, please.
Thank you. So many of the results of our discussion, we were not so crowded, but quite intensive and qualitative, and were very similar with the results that came from the other tables. One of them, as I think, as all of you, there was discussion. We started from some projects, so we shared also knowledge of the projects where the participants were involved in. And one of the first questions that we made ourselves was, what is a sustainable tourism? What do we intend? What do we mean with the sustainability? Is mass tourism against elite tourism, or is it something different? Is sustainability taking into account the impact on local communities? So this was just the framework in which we discussed. So starting from the first societal need, we discussed about the fact that so far needs and interests are opposing. So the slides are not going, but anyway, sorry. So far needs and interests are opposing. We need a mechanism to balance it all. So coastal and marine tourism planning and management should rebalance conflicting needs and demands. As far as the mechanisms, the second question that was related to the mechanism to share and co-create knowledge, we thought that gamification could be a good tool to relate decisions and needs and different actors. What do we mean as gamification is an environment where all actors are involved and understand what the real to produce a concrete outcome. So local communities want to protect cultural identity, prosperity, and well-being, and the ecosystem. Everything is going to the preconditions. We think that everything is interconnected, so we need to produce a system knowledge to support the system thinking and governance. We made some example from Airbnb, for example, that is considered just from a management of local authorities, for example, but has an impact on all aspects of life in a city, or also low cost transportation. And so the idea is to open also to another way of other visions, such as the one that can bring philosophy, social sciences, and also artists, can make us think out of the box. Last but not least, constraints and opportunities. We need to, we discussed a lot about blue growth and and we thought that blue growth seems to has to go beyond the cliché and has to integrate social dimension and not only the economic one, which is normally in the policy discourse. An important thing is to overcome fragmentation of competences, which always happens when you have to do with the tourism, and so not to think in compartmental way. I think it's enough.
Thanks a lot, Alba. So we move to the last workshop. So citizens from today and tomorrow. Fiona, please. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I'm going to move kind of around here a bit, or maybe around there. Yeah, we only had citizens to talk about, so yeah, really narrow subject. So yeah, we had a few projects to talk about around sort of citizen science, about social media campaigns, and then there was another one on sort of well-being and health. So answering the questions, because the slide's not going to come up. So so understand the needs and demands. telling people about their science. So we need to get that right. And also we had an idea about behaviour change. It's kind of has been a buzzword, I feel, in the last few years. It's very hard to evaluate, and really it should just be an underlying thing to all we do. I think everything we do, we want to make a change and behaviour change, so maybe it shouldn't be a precondition in calls and stuff like that. And the last joker is, get your head out the ocean. I love my head in the ocean, so but that's mainly really, as we say, look outside the box. So there's lots of good things going on that we wouldn't necessarily relate to the ocean, but share those experiences and get those people in instead of talking to ourselves all the time. That's about it. Save the best till last.
Too short, yes, compared to the others, yeah.
Oh, I'm shocked, yes.
Okay, so thanks a lot. I wish to thank really all the people who has contributed to these workshops, and also the rapporteurs. And now it's time to go ahead in our activities, and we're going to build some reflections and to learn from what we heard so far. And especially we want to have some feedbacks on some experts. So I'm going to invite here on the stage for key people, for experts with whom we want to share their vision, we want to learn, and to listen some reactions from what has been presented here so far. So please, Francesca Santoro from UNESCO, if you can reach us, and Gordon Dalton from the Ring Project, please take a seat. Dominique Litvas from HELCOM, and Gail Scowcroft from University of Rhode Island. And I will give them. Okay, so first of all, thanks for your presence here. So I think we have seen many items that has been presented through from these sessions with very diverse kind of issues, suggestions, requests, and also offer, I would say, to contribute to enforce or sustain ocean literacy in the RI. You have very different experience, different background and roles on your institutions, and we would like to know if there were some messages that, for instance, surprised you, something that it's really new that you never heard, or that you think maybe they should not be here, or they are somehow a bit contradictory regarding your way of thinking or working. So, and also so new ideas that are different from what you were expecting, and also if there are some key messages that are very relevant for your own activities, something that you take home and that you could use in your daily work. Okay, Gail? No, I can give you mine.
Well, I think one of the messages that's been emphasized in our discussions here today, and also in some discussions I've had over the last year, is that we have been investing in increasing the ocean literacy of citizens around the world. It's become a global process, which is exciting for those of us that have been involved for years and years. And but one of the messages that I keep hearing is that we're not looking beyond our own community for answers. And Fiona touched on it a little bit just now, but we discussed today the social networkings, social media outreach that's happening, and how are we going to determine if that's effective, and are we reaching the goals that we intend. And that's just one thing under the umbrella that I'm going to mention. There are experts in the world who know how to analyze the effectiveness of education campaigns, marketing campaigns, and so forth. in terms of, are we really going to lead people to change their behaviors? And those are not the people in this room. None of us are experts at that. That's the business community, because they invest millions and billions of dollars in that kind of enterprise, both from the pre-production of a product all the way through the testing of a product and then into the implementation phase. And so I just want to leave with the message that we need to have other actors in these meetings, particularly the business community, who could help us be more effective in what we do.
Okay, so thanks for your first comment. We will have some business representatives throughout these 2 days, but please, Francesca, your reflections on your reaction.
Yeah, so I would really like to pick up on that, because as well as Gail, I've been discussing some of these topics in many gatherings, meetings, workshops, and sorry to say this, but I haven't heard anything like completely new in these workshops or something that just surprised me. The contrary, I've heard the same messages repeating on and on. So we need to, give positive messages. We need to involve other stakeholders. We need to engage more with the social sciences, experts. So our main point now, since we don't have that much time to act, and people like Greta Thunberg reminded us, and things like that should really makes us thinking. A little girl, 16 years old, a girl with the Asperger syndrome, has been able to wake up an entire generation and even more. So I think we really need to, and I go back to what Fiona said, we really need to get out of our bubble and community. And the most exciting experiences I've been having in the last, I would say, year and a half, when I had the chance to really meet people outside of our community. It might sound a little posh, but I had the opportunity to be on the island of Richard Branson lately, and to meet, entrepreneurs and start-uppers and people who are really outside of our circles, and they are really eager to get messages from us on what they can help us. So they were keep on asking me, we really want to help, to let us know what we can do. So I think we should be really focusing on concrete actions, things that we really want to do, we think are important, that we need to do to really, work concretely on reversing the situation, because we are in a situation of decline of ocean health. There are no, doubt about it. So we really need to focus on concrete action, and where the private sector, the social media people, the business people can help us, because they're waiting for us to tell them, help us in this. And they have the resources to do that we don't have. So we need really to get out of these type of, instead of saying all the time we need to get these people, we need to do it. We need to do it now, because we don't have that much time to waste.
Okay, but do you think that our doors are closed, or that maybe we should open and invite?
No. I think that we don't have the right approach.
We don't have the right approach.
I'm referring to this experience I had, because it was new for me as well. These people don't come to meetings like this. Business people, they don't come to workshop like this. They have very little time. So policymakers, they have very little time. So we really need to think to alternatives way to get them, because otherwise we will not get them. We will keep on inviting them, but we will not get them. And it's not lack of willingness. It's not lack of willingness to work with us. That's the important message. But we need to think other types of involving them and engaging with them.
Okay. Do you think you could keep your comment there, and maybe we ask for some if there is any reaction from the floor about these two items. So we're not a closed community, but we're not able to communicate. Pierre, sorry, over there. We're not able to communicate to some sectors. We're not able to gather help.
Hello, good afternoon.
If you can introduce yourself so that...
Yeah, I'm glad I just arrived. My name is Lodewijk Opspoel. I work for the Netherlands government on integrated maritime policy. It struck me that you were both talking business. And I was wondering if you invited the World Ocean Council to be present here. And what did they say? What did Paul say? He didn't have time?
They didn't have time to come at that event. There was an issue to their attendance for the policy workshop that we do at the Parliament on Wednesday, which is targeted their interest there. And then we had discussion with them on bringing young professionals to the young professional workshop that is taking place at that time.
Sorry, Anna.
I agree, but I know we have not our doors closed, but of course we need to reflect and to exchange among ourselves to feel more confident. But we have to act, and in fact, going to businesses, meeting these people is the key point now. But I never thought they would come to these events. I think that we must make our priority to go to their events and to network with them and to engage them. So we must engage each in our own country with businesses around where we can make the difference. We should try to go to their meetings and try to engage a network with them, convince them on the importance of ocean literacy, of responsible research and innovation, etc. We must also act on professional training. When people are trained for the industry, we must make sure that sustainability values and ocean literacy are there. And we must also do that with scientists. So we must act on different multipliers, and that is something that we learned with Sea Change. We have to work with stakeholders, each type at a time. And this should be our main target from now on.
Okay, so
maybe just one issue, because I feel in the comments from Gail there were two messages. One was about business, but I didn't understand it in the same way that we are discussing. I understood that they are professionals in marketing, social media, etc. They should be with us in the room for developing the initiatives and sharing. That's what I understood, Gail, as your message. And I think you're right. We tried to get media community in the room here. We succeeded a bit. So there are some newcomers that never thought about ocean literacy. And we feel that bridging ocean literacy, media literacy, social media expertise is a way forward. But maybe I'll let you develop this further if you feel it's important to stress it.
Well, I'm going to give a different perspective, and I'm Gordon Dalton, the coordinator of the RING project, and I'm here on behalf of the responsible research and innovation perspective rather than ocean literacy. But the two of you are joining your closing event today on literacy and RRI, so I'm going to talk about the RRI perspective. And the RING project is a global project, a truly global project. Most of the European projects, or H2020 projects, are European focused. So this has been one of the few global projects reaching outside Europe, trying to find out what the rest of the world is doing in best practice. RRI is a European invention, it's a European, and the rest of the world perceives RRI as EU focused, EU centric. And as a result, almost fights against it. So the RING project is going to be exploring what are the perceptions of what is responsible, what is responsibility from their perspective, and then the RING project will bring this best practice back to Europe. So the point I'm getting at here is that there's maybe completely different perspectives and almost good practice from China, Japan, Africa that we need to learn from. And this is certainly what the Ring Project is going to be focusing on. The next is the community. So the community is the way of sustaining this. So we're creating a Ring community of best practice stakeholders in all aspects of RI. And also, we have a dedicated work package on the competitive advantage. We do realize that industry, which is perhaps the most important stakeholder, won't adopt best practice RI unless it's perceived to have an advantage of some shape, either economic or marketing or branding. And this will be one of our biggest, positives, that we will succeed in change. So UNESCO is our major partner in this, and I'm glad to say that we have a big cooperation here across UNESCO. It's becoming a big player in European projects in RI. Just before I hand it over, there's the connection then with the marine is the second project which I'm coordinating called GRIP, which is grounding RI in research performing organizations. So this is a real action project. So there's a lot of theory and best practice, but this is a great first project as far as I'm aware, where we're going to be implementing and change management plans in the governance framework of 5 marine centres as test demo sites. So this would be my centre in Mare in Cork, and Plocan in Canaries, Wavec in Lisbon, École Centre Nantes in France, and University of Swansea. And we're going to be doing a classic action plan creation of audit of the centre for the 5 pillars of gender equality, open access, citizen science engagement, ethics, and then creating an action plan, implementing it, and then monitoring how it's actually being changed. And this is the real key, will we be successful in changing the governance framework of these institutions? And we'll be using these indicators. So that's my message on action. So I'm going to pass it over here.
Yes, because now we want to see a regional sea convention perspective.
Yes.
What is your understanding about what we could do and how? Yeah?
Well, thank you for the question, and I'm trying to link as much as I can what we've just said now with what I've heard during the workshops, and well, clearly there is the processes are clearly policy driven, much more than they are business driven. And what also came out of, for instance, the marine litter workshop is that at the core of it, we really need very strong scientific underpinnings, because we need facts. It cannot be. We're not here to sell yogurts, or we're here to follow science. So the question here is, how can we then include this science in the policy? How can policy base its decisions on the best available science? And this is where HELCOM, for instance, comes in. HELCOM is such an interface. HELCOM provides recommendations, and I'm mentioning that because our recommendations are just that. They are recommendations. They don't have any legal implications, and we cannot enforce them. On the other hand, because we involve science already at when we do these recommendations at HELCOM, in expert groups, in workshops, work groups, then it goes up to higher policy levels until they get approved at the ministerial level. Because we have this involvement of science with policy at many different levels along the entire process, we come up with recommendations that actually work and that are implemented by the Baltic Sea nations. And then these recommendations trickle down at the national level within their respective ministries and respective countries, and usually are translated into specific actions. So this is the HELCOM approach here, and I must say that as much as, of course, the private sector is the driving force, and as you mentioned, I can't remember that there's huge lobby power, and the budgets are just different, and they have the experts. They basically buy the experts. Nevertheless, it still works in the Baltic Sea if it is properly structured.
Okay, thank you. Before maybe we go ahead with some other question, is there any reaction from the floor on this? Because what I noticed that regional sin conventions somehow they are users of knowledge, but also they produce knowledge, and they could also, let's say, be actor in order to increase the literacy. I mean, of all the citizens within, I mean, the place of their responsibility. And I wonder if you take care about this, and also at the same time, if you have some requirement in relation to the science-based that you use, because, for instance, FAO now is talking about not science-based knowledge, sorry, not science-based management, but knowledge-based management. So they're shifting from the scientific evidences to the knowledge evidences that somehow includes both science and interaction with stakeholders.
Yes, well, if I may quickly respond to that, what I've heard as well in the Marine Data workshop, but also in like the reports from the other workshops, is that we're not so clear about who the stakeholders are, and some stakeholders, like the general public, as informed as we may be, might not have the same understandings as the scientific community, or at the policy level, or at the business level. So we really need to break down the message into at different levels, and what message, what are we saying, what are we going to tell to who, and especially what is the effect that we want our message to have. At the policy level, do we want legislation? At the citizen level, do we want behavioral change? At the business level, do we want change in production? Do we want different packaging when it comes to marine litter and plastics, for instance?
Yes.
You asked me for my opinion about the workshops that I did attend, and I tried to go through to a few. I'm just going to go through the 5 pillars of ORI and give my opinion on whether these were addressed or not addressed or included. So open access, open access was addressed. That data should be freely available, so that was well done. Ethics and integrity, I didn't hear too much about whether the data that's coming out was tried to be tested to be ethically and responsible, and how that data was tested and evaluated and produced. Citizen engagement, yes, very much a feature. Everyone knows that citizen power is there, but I didn't hear any mention of CSOs, citizen science organizations, and then researchers themselves. I'm the chair of ICORSA, the International Consortium of Research Staff Associations. Our main reason to be here is that we're not, or in this project of RING and GRIP, is that we're not consulted. Researchers are a silent force that are missed in the consultation process. Yet we do all the science. STEM education, I didn't hear that mentioned. Governance, yes. Policy, of course. Everyone thinks that governance is about doing policy change, but how is the governance, the institutional change of the governance thought about? And finally, gender equality. I didn't hear once gender equality in any of the workshops. And gender, of course, and gender equality, diversity is a huge, powerful change, and wasn't mentioned.
Okay. Any other comment? I mean, from the panelists regarding this discussion that you had, because the impression that I have is that my understanding is, okay, we need to urgently move. Okay, we know, we are aware about these needs. Somehow there is a growing community around both ocean literacy and the RRI. There is a growing understanding about the potential in order to make a change, but we need to be effective. So somehow we understand that we need, of course, resources. These resources could be both private, they could come also from the institutions. I mean, Europe is doing quite a lot in order to sustain this change. We have to recognize this, okay? We need, I mean, ourselves to get organized with different approach. But so what's next? Okay, so really, how we can really make a change? Which is your vision? I mean, going beyond the fact that we need to liaise with important people and get the money, because at the end, this is one part, but we need they could be instrumental to mobilize and to make the change. But making a change implies also to have some, let's say, direct relation.
And that is this. We as scientists, education professionals, expect that if we tell people the facts, people will then change their behaviors. And even though we sort of know that doesn't work, we don't know how to get from knowledge to action. I think Anna said something about that this morning. How do we get there? And Francesca, sorry, it was Francesca. But Anna has said that too. but anyway, what the marketing folks have said to me is you have to understand that from knowledge to action is a journey. And that journey is punctuated by a minimum of 5 steps. And if we don't understand how to move people through the steps that they must take, they will never change their behavior or their actions. And so what we need to start doing is working with experts that can help us identify the steps that we need to guide people through so that they can understand about ocean issues and then they can change their behavior accordingly. And we don't have the expertise to do that, but the marketing people do. That's what they do for a living. And I want to...
So I think one thing is that has taught me a lot on how we communicate. And this is really a win-win situation because Sky comes to me for content and they produce very good, communication products that I would never be able to do because I don't have the resources and I don't have, first of all, the capacity to do that. So why should we try to become a social media expert or a communicator or a journalist where there are journalists and social media experts? Same thing for the business. You said correctly, very correctly, I fully agree with you, is not about going to the private sector to give us the money to do our research. On the other end, again, I'm going back to partnership, is going to them to say, as Gail was saying, let's partner. Because you have certain needs in terms of also research and science. We need resources, it's true, but we can do, partnership, very useful partnerships. So it's not by chance that one of the SDGs is about partnerships. SDG 17 is about partnerships. And that's one of the lessons learned for me. I mean, throughout the years and throughout the meetings and the partnerships, and the workshops, we need to really have all of these elements together. We need, the science, we need the communicators, we need the policymakers, the private sector, and we don't have to try to steal each other's job, but rather, highlighting what each one of us can bring, focusing on what is our speciality and our capacity, because we are good in that. So, the next step for me for action is really to identify, and the decade is going to do that, identifying some major challenges for our future, some societal outcomes where we want to be in 2030, and really identifying concrete activities where we can work together in partnership with all the segments of the society that I mentioned. And again, not going to the private sector as a cash machine, but also philanthropies, because they don't like that. They don't like to be treated as cash machine, but rather actors with whom we have to partner with.
Thank you, Francesca. If I may add a couple of comments on this. My understanding that we have the tools. I mean, we're developing tools in order to know really how to proceed in this process that is related to co-creation. I mean, I'm not talking only about our projects. I mean, but many projects are developing and working in this direction. So we should take advantage from this sort of knowledge that has been developed. If you go on the demo deck there, you will see a roadmap in order to implement RRI. You will see guidelines for ocean literacy. You will see many kind of tools that you can use. But we need to co-create, co-build, and information that we gather when we were trying to understand the understanding of some agencies, research funding agencies, or some implementers of research regarding RRI, our understanding was that yes, they know the concepts, they know part of the concepts, maybe some dimensions. They like it somehow. They could implement it, but they need priorities. They need a change management approach in order to let these kind of topics like ocean literacy or RRI become really a core business of their activities. So somehow there is also a link in between this kind of work that you could do, or we could do at international level, I mean, for convincing and for moving the citizen into the one direction, but also at the same time, in parallel, we're going to influence the policymakers, and we'll have somehow also and help in order to let prioritize these kind of issues. At the end, science, for instance, for Marine Litter was posing the problem of having this plastic at sea. A policy like the marine strategy pointed about the need on understanding the quality and qualify the status, and a lot of things came, and there were citizens really pushing now, because now they're more informed, and now things are changing. So it's really a virtual circular process that we need to establish. So please.
Yes, thank you. Obviously, there is a clear need to have the soft science, like social media, communications, sell the hard science. And how hard can that be, especially when one is designing projects? When projects are designed, one looks at travel costs, one looks at experts, how much will that cost? So one should then include, when these projects are designed, to already from the word go have a certain percentage, and a substantial one, especially when it comes to ocean literacy, allocated to communication activities. And then instead of having, instead of trying to figure it out in-house with internal capacity, hand this over to an external professional company the same way than the private sector does. I mean, what does impede us to do the same?
Yes, yeah. I think I would like to emphasize one point among the many that you said about the fact that you should have different kind of skills and capacities. You should not have only hard science, but also soft sciences. And in our case, I think that transdisciplinarity should be the rule. So to have the capability to have both humanities scholars, and practitioners, so social scientists and so on, and along with the natural scientists. Well, when you work together, and also all the other skills and the capabilities that comes from that side. So, thank you, Gordon. If you want to say the really last words, and then we close because we move to the next panel.
Thank you. Just a point, and Francesco, thank you for bringing up the SDGs. You asked where are we going, and RRI as a concept may not be going much further than 2020. It's already, the SWAS program is closing, and it's not, there will be no RRI initiatives anymore. The EU Commission are kind of not in favour of the concept of RRI, and so the Ring project is looking to the rest of the world to find out what is the next framework, and it will be, one of its work packages is to map RRI to the SDGs, to see, explore, are there new frameworks that could emerge from this? The SDGs are globally accepted and very popular and increasing in global awareness. So I think a way forward could be to tap into this global awareness SDGs and then evolve our strategies of communication and advocacy around those.
I believe that, let's say, the Commission is still in favor of RRI. This morning we had some comments from Linden Farrell regarding this. Maybe they are thinking about an evolution of the approach. So also some dimensions has become, somehow compulsory to be taken into account in many calls. So somehow it is spreading, and they are reorganizing their work. I think that from my perspective, we need to think about the concepts and the process rather than the names. So we want to achieve a sustainable ocean, a healthy ocean. We can do it through many approaches, and within these approaches we need to have the engagement of people. we need to increase the literacy, we need to have some research and innovation that is democratic and embedding and having all the citizens somehow collaborate and stakeholders collaborating to the building. And then we can give whatever the name it is, the better it is, the better we will succeed in order to liaise with many other entities and engage them. But this is possibly the process. So I wish to thank all our speakers. I don't know if we can give the last word to Francesca. One
very brief.
Yes.
Two things. I think also one thing. We need to bring also more people here. I mean, because there are wonderful initiatives all around the world, and somehow we tend to give, always to highlight always the same type of institutions. So a help here, how we can bring more people and avoid to be always the usual suspects.
Okay, thank you. Thanks to all our speakers, again, our panelists, and we move now to the next panel. So, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. We have half an hour to go. That's the end of a bit heavy, I would say, afternoon. The idea of the last panel was to get a more forward-looking vision and to say what we heard here, these are a bit traditional sectors, traditional ideas. Even if myself I feel that there are new ideas coming in, and if I would go back to what Gordon said, is maybe we are not working enough on the drivers that make a change, like changes in the governance, in the management, in the performance indicators that we use, etc. There is many to do, and I think we can work on it. So the idea was to invite on the table 4 people that will carry with them some future challenges for the ocean that we have not heard so far. I will invite them one by one and then explain what we try to achieve. The first one was Manuel Sira. Please come here on the, was to say, today we start hearing about an issue of high seas. And it's becoming more and more important on the table, but we have not heard about it. We also mentioned blue growth sectors, but there are new blue growth sectors that are coming. So I would like to invite also Jan Shepherd from DG Mare to join us here. Thanks, Jan. That will shed some light on these new sectors. There is an issue of deep sea mining that Xenia is going to carry with her to the panel. And then Rémi Gruet from Ocean Energy Europe will bring marine renewable energy. So you can have a seat here, be a bit comfortable, and I will just explain what we expect from you in this last session. So the idea was to say we worked on fisheries, we worked on marine litter. This is becoming mainstreams, and we start to have some evidence, to have some recommendation, guidance on how to do differently, to do better for responsible research, innovation, ocean literacy, and knowledge system. But are these recommendations, these ideas, relevant for the future and relevant for some of these sectors that are represented here? Maybe they are. Maybe we can follow the same line, get organized in the same way. Maybe we can also anticipate and realize that for some reasons, whether the new challenge itself, the actors involved, the way it is organized, it is a bit differently. So that's the idea of this last session. Very ambitious. There are many emerging challenges that are not on the panel here. You might bring them in the discussions. So we start, what we have asked also is each person to give us a couple of words about their own future challenge, because we might not be all aware of it, and then to say what I heard, maybe it is different for me, and we have to get organized differently. Because we talked a lot about the business sectors, I will start maybe asking Rémi. You're a good candidate to break a bit the flow. What do you think from your perspectives maybe give a couple of words on marine renewables, what is on the table, what are the challenges behind it, and research, innovation, literacy, what does it bring?
Okay, thank you. Pierre. So my name is Rémi Gruet. I'm the CEO of Ocean Energy Europe. And for those of you who don't know us, we are the organization representing ocean energy at EU level. So we're mostly, it's true, representing industrials, but we also have a lot of researchers, including University Cork, from which Gordon is coming, and also regions and the entire supply chain. So it's really across the board. If you're involved in ocean energy, then this is, we represent you. The challenge for, or at least, well, let me give 2 words about the future of ocean energy first. Like to give you an idea, we represent a technology that is renewable, just like offshore wind. It's a very similar business model. We expect that about 100 gigawatts of ocean energy could be installed by 2050. And that would be, because it's probably not telling you much, but it would be about 10% of current EU consumption of electricity. So it's a significant potential, but it's a potential that is currently not realized. We're really at the beginning of this sector. We also consider that it's an industrial opportunity because the same as offshore wind, it can make use of existing skills, it can make use of the infrastructure, port authorities, vessels that we already have existing and that works for the industries that we've heard from before, so existing industries. And last but not least, you might be wondering why we would need a new renewable. We have wind and solar. We have biomass. We already have all of that. So why do we need us? Well, from our perspective, ocean energy produces at very different timings from wind and solar, and that is probably one of the main reasons to develop it towards 2050, because we're going to look in 2050 at a system which has probably anywhere between, if you listen to the IPCC report, 80% and 100% of renewable capacity online. And in such a system, you will have a very powerful variations from wind and solar. And producing at different times, we can help balance the grid. So that's a bit an overview. Now to go back to your question about the business reaction. So I'm not going to go straight into okay, I'm just going to address the business reaction question. My reaction, indeed, from a business perspective was, or my advice maybe to you was, use known vessels of communication. And I saw on the slides there was a logo from UNESCO and there was a logo from the Intergroup. And for my members, the Intergroup, they don't know what it is. But I'm here to tell them that the Intergroup of the European Parliament is an important vessel through which legislation can happen. So if you publish your conclusions as part of a project, if I'm a company, I'm like, okay, who are these guys? I don't know them. Or I like them, they have good ideas, but maybe in 2 years when the project is over, what's going to happen with it? So why should I spend my time working with you on a 2-year project where I have no idea what the visibility is beyond that? So use existing vessels. If you manage to go through the Intergroup or to UNESCO and to have some regulation, obviously, but some comments or some papers produced, some actions that are part of these vessels or of these institutions, then you have a better chance of getting heard. The second point or the second advice to speak to the business is what's in it for me. Like, if I'm a salesperson, I need to go back to my boss and say, today I worked for you and I sold this much. If I'm a boss, I have to go back to my board and to say, this month or this year, I worked for you, for your money, and this is what I've done. So there is always this in the back of the mind of anybody involved in business, and if you approach them, you need to approach them with the first thing you need to tell them, I want to speak to you for this, about this, and this is what's in it for you. So that's my second advice. And my last one is, despite if you do these 2 things the best you can, there will always be limits to which business can listen to the civil society.
Maybe 2 questions. In the previous presentation discussions, we heard about social responsibility, and then a bit before we heard about the Sustainable Development Goals. So is this drivers to business? Yes or no? And maybe for marine renewable, how different it might be as compared to more general recommendation you made from a wider business perspective?
Okay, so the SDGs are nice guidance. They are not a driver to business as long as they haven't been translated into legislation. So business and money is a primary driver, regulation is a secondary driver, sometimes becomes a primary driver when it affects money, but regulation is absolutely needed. So I used to have my comment about the COP, for example, which is one of the ways the Sustainable Development Goals have been implemented, and it's looking specifically at climate change, is it has no business implications from a regulation perspective, but it has a marketing impact, and that marketing impact is traveling beyond what my immediate regulatory implications are, and it's going in a direction that increases, for example, to give you a very concrete example, increases risks for coal-fired power plants. So in the electricity business at the moment, you see a worldwide movement to kick coal out of the systems. And it's a movement that is not initiated by NGOs, it's a movement that is initiated by financiers. Why? Because of all the work that the SDGs, the COP, and everybody in the NGOs is putting into making the point that coal is a problem for climate change and that it needs to be kicked out. Now, this might not have yet been translated into legislation and into regulation, but it is a risk, and investors hate everything or nothing more than risk. At least they want to be able to quantify it, and at the moment they are unable to do that. So this has success, despite having no regulation directly generated, has actually managed to have a very strong impact by pulling investors out of a business that is very climate damaging. So that's for your first question. And to your second question, I think our business model and the impacts on our business are going to be very similar to offshore wind. So from what I heard earlier in the feedback of the workshop, the most important for us is going to be citizens' engagement, very clearly. Contributing to making a change. I mean, we are dealing in renewables with technologies that are generally welcomed by citizens. Obviously, nobody wants projects near to his home, but if you rank technologies from top to bottom in terms of which ones are liked best, you will always find solar, wind, hydro, gas, coal, and nuclear. I believe that's a ranking that's been consistent in the Eurobarometer studies in the last 10, 15 years. We, Ocean Energy, are right at the top with wind and solar. So there is really good perception in that. And what we are able to do is, and the other thing we are subject to is the IEA, the Environmental Impact Assessment Directive. So every project we put in the water is subject to an environmental impact assessment. While you do an environmental impact assessment, you need to do engagement with the local communities, and it really helps, and we've learned that with the offshore wind and with the onshore wind projects. It really helps design a project in a manner that then favorizes its acceptance and then its implementation. Because you speak to everybody on site, then you have less issues at the back. Well, I'll stop here for now.
Yeah, maybe I ask Ian if you want to get a wider, let's say, blue growth perspective, and in particular in relation to knowledge creation, literacy, capacity building, raising awareness, etc.
Okay, well, I think awareness is already quite high. There were, 17 million people in the UK watched Blue Planet 2, and that's more than Strictly Come Dancing. When we did a public consultation on the plastic strategy, 95% of people from business, civil society, also public, private, science, all said something urgent needed to be done. That's almost unheard of. You get less agreement on the date for Christmas than that. But as far as what we want to message, I think you need to think in the future. How do you want your oceans to look like in 2050? Because they're not going to look like they look like now. If you've looked at the Commission's decarbonisation strategy that came out in 2050, it says by 2050 we will need twice as much as electricity as we have now. That's twice as much because cars are already moving to electricity. There's legislation in place to take away gas from houses. It will move to electricity, heat pumps. So twice as much electricity. And all the projections, there were 8 scenarios, they all showed that half of that's going to come from wind energy. Another half will come from, about half of that will come from offshore, more or less. And so that will be about 25% of Europe's electricity will be offshore. If we add Remy's 10%, we come to 35%. Now that's going to take up some space. We also need to think about food. The decarbonisation strategy says you can't have everything as electricity. You also need to fly aeroplanes, which aren't going to run on batteries or with long leads. They'll need biofuel. Biofuel, you need land to grow it on. That will mean less land for agriculture. Currently, there's about 40% of Europe's land is for agriculture. If you take away the land for food, then that means you've got to get the food from somewhere else. This is going to come from the ocean. We've done some rough calculations. It says that for the wind energy, it could be up to 10% of Europe's EEZ taken up with wind turbines. So you've got to think this is going to radically change. Also, if you start growing algae, mussels, to provide food with a low carbon imprint, that's going to take up space as well. So these are the sort of things that you need to think. You need to think not what the ocean's like now, and you can't keep it like it is now. Even if you wanted to, it's going to change. How do you want it to change? And these are the sort of things that you need to think about.
And does it just mean that research innovation should focus more efforts on this forward-looking vision and then put its research priority, or does it also implies doing research differently, sharing research results differently?
It also means both, I suppose, but it also means, I mean, you asked me about the blue economy because there's a whole lot of small businesses that provide services to ocean energy, renewable energy, also to offshore aquaculture. They do sensors, they do remote handling, and the research should focus on these new aspects, these new industries, because we'll need new skills and new insights to be able to lower the cost and be able to do it.
A couple of answers, let's say, from people here, and let's say from Remy's sides, we feel that it's a sector that is to be considered like other sectors. A couple of hints to take them on board more easily, what you mentioned, and from Ian's side to say, but let's remember that in 30 years' time, out there it will be significantly different. Any reactions from your point of view, or what does it mean in terms of research, innovation, literacy efforts, whatever? Let's say, does it require a change? Let's say you would expect it. We talked a bit before about change of paradigm, changing the way we do business ourselves as scientists. Any comments, reactions, ideas that bring on the table? Yeah.
Thank you. It's just a quick question. Ian's comment about the changing scenario of our seas. Our seas are going to become very crowded. Marine spatial planning is a very sensible way of doing this, but it's coming up with the barrier that single use of space is going to be a huge problem. Wind energy doesn't want to share with agriculture, doesn't want to share with fishing. Multiple use of space. Is it possible? Is there going to be a policy for shared multiple use of space? How effective will it be? Do you see a real cooperation in space in the future?
Yeah, of course. Marine spatial planning is crucial to this. And we've already seen the Belgians are doing some test growing mussels on their wind farms, and apparently they taste delicious. I haven't tried them yet, but I'm told they're on sale. So.
Yeah, to add to that, actually, they're not only growing mussels. There is a plan for 5 megawatt wave energy farm inside an existing bottom-mounted wind farm outside of Belgium. So, MSP is key, but you can also find ways sometimes to make it work together.
But clearly, when you say that it will require some changes, because whether us from responsible or sea change, we had a bit a sectoral approach in some of the work we did, and clearly when you move to common use of the space, you will have to change that very drastically. Anna, you want to?
Yes, yes, because since we are talking about the ocean in 30 years, I think that we cannot miss education. We always forget that we keep educating our children as if we were in the post-industrial revolution. We need to change it completely. Our education continues to be in silos, in disciplines, and not project-oriented, and very narrow-minded. So if we want to have all this, we have to prepare our children and those that are already in the school, not just the small kids for 30 years, because this will be the future workforce that will bring about all this.
I think that a group of young people mobilized around climate change that also shows that maybe the driver is different. Let's say, do we move a bit to
I have one more on education.
Go ahead.
The European Institute of Technology has proposed doing a knowledge innovation community on marine coastal matters, and that mixes education, research, and industry. And apparently it's in second place. The first one proposed is on cultural issues. The next one is marine and security are tied for doing the next one. If you can put some pressure on your MEPs to promote the marine one, it will help.
Let's talk about it later in the cocktail part of the evening. There were two other issues we put on the table, deep sea mining, high seas. I don't know how you want to, maybe elements from both of you, Xenia first, Manuel then, and then seeing a few words on what is behind and what is about doing research innovation, literacy differently.
Okay, thank you. First of all, I am sitting here instead of a colleague who is unable to join us today. So, and the second point is that I am not a deep sea scientist. I am, the deepest I have gone down is only 7 meters. So it's nothing, okay, compared to where the deep sea mining is going to take place. But I'm sitting here also as a concerned citizen, as a business person. My background is in business, and I've been listening with great interest the debate about how to bring business on board and how to change their minds. And I totally agree with you what it is for me here and how to bring in on board the business. Concerning the deep sea mining, from the point of Marina, the project Marina, we have done, the way we have done responsible research and innovation in marine issues, it was like, what are the hot topics? And deep sea mining is one of the hot topics. And we have run 3 workshops in 3 different areas with 3 different methodologies with different participants. But it's interesting, one was run in Molfetta in Italy, another one it was in Azores, and another one was an international level, it was in Lisbon. What is interesting to see is that we have a divide. We have a clear divide where on one side we're saying, yes, we need these minerals. Why? We just heard them. The answers are here. We just heard them. We have to move from fossil energy to renewable energy. But how are these turbines done? Well, these turbines, and correct me if I'm wrong, you need the different minerals to put them in the magnets of the turbines to use them. That's what I'm not okay. Well, we can debate about it, but what I read was like, okay, we need the different minerals to put them in the green technology, in batteries of hybrid cars, and in the different turbines of the windmills. Okay, that's one thing. And the other thing is that the ocean has to change because the ocean has to feed us. Okay? And how many of you have gone, deep down, and how many of us do we know what is going to happen when we start harvesting the nodules on the bottom of the sea? I can see where I live, there is a mine, an open mine, and it took 40 years for nature to conquer the area and become a natural area, which is interesting with birds and things like that. Okay? And that is on the land, which is raining a lot and there's a lot of sun. So how is it going to be when we are, thousands of meters below where it's dark and these biotopes are growing very, very slowly? So the conclusion from these 3 workshops was that the participants, they went forward and they said, well, we need more the legislation and governance, international governance, because and now I'm coming to the high seas that Manuel is going to pick over. We need more, we need to know more before we start digging, and not digging, but collecting the different minerals from the bottom of the sea. We need to have, we need open access platform, and we need more information when the companies are going to go down and start collecting and collecting the minerals from the bottom of the sea. Looking again at the supply and demand of a study which was run in 2016, it says that by 2050 the demand would be more than 100% for renewable energy. So the conclusion from these 3 workshops was, can we not do it through circular economy? Can we not collect all these minerals we need from this type of get the renewables, get circular economy going so we can get these minerals? This was one of the main conclusions of these 3 workshops. The other thing was that how are we going to restore these ecosystems? What's going to happen down there when we collect it, and what will be the effect on the rest of the layers of the ocean coming up once we start touching the bottom? So the conclusion, again, was based on the moratorium, which was, well, voted by the European Parliament. We need to know more, and let's do the things right, at least this time, and not do the mistakes we have done in other parts of the world. So with these last words, I give the microphone to Manuel.
Yeah, let's have Manuel on the high seas, and still we might go back to questions about knowledge, research, innovation, capacity. What does it mean? Do we need to change? Manuel, high seas.
Yeah, so just first thing about high seas, the high seas are not something new. I mean, they've been there for a long time. What is new, what is emerging, is the way we tackle the governance of the high seas. And one of the things I find interesting is basically very few of us have been there. I don't know in the room who has actually seen the high seas, traveled over there. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, round, let's say 10 in the whole room. So, and all the others have only seen films or maybe animals in aquariums or whatever. So the challenge is how we human beings are going to organize our activities in an area or an environment that we don't know, that we never get to see. It's something, really special, and to some extent, it's true with any ocean-related issue. The difference is that you have more films on coral reefs or whatever, or on fishing activities in coastal zones, then you have opportunities to see the high seas. So they're an emerging issue, obviously, because there is now a multilateral negotiation at the UN, and actually the next round of negotiation starts next week. It's interesting to see that it's the biggest multilateral negotiation that currently going on. There's no such, I would say, process on any other issue at the UN. And Europe speaks with one voice, which is also something interesting. It means that none of our countries is speaking on their own behalf. They have to agree to give one advice, one European advice on all the issues. So it's really an interesting governance subject. We covered it in the last month in different ways by organizing an international conference in Nausicaa, the French National Sea Center, last June. And that's when we had fishermen saying, well, it's good to have something else than formal negotiations to speak with scientists and decision makers, and that's when we realized that we're all looking for the same thing. And we had a marina workshop here in Brussels. Some of you attended that workshop, and the interesting thing then is that by using a collective intelligence methodology, people who had very strong ideas on how we should govern the high seas, etc., changed their mind, in the sense that instead of saying we should strengthen effective bodies and rules, or we should do more with the new negotiation, or etc., they all concluded that we should do more research first, sharing of data and information, and more awareness raising, so that all the actors would know more before starting the discussion. And I find it interesting to see that when you look at a marine subject, which is obviously complex, the marine world is complex, our activities in link with the marine world are complex. When you look at that, using specific methodologies will allow to open new approaches, new views, new ways of tackling the issue.
Let's say if we hear what the panel says, is that clearly more complex and more precious in the futures. There is an issue of sharing and working on the unknown, what is not visible, and maybe what some others are dealing when they deal with groundwater issues. For example, when you're in the field of water, it's always a bit challenging to discuss, communicate about what nobody is aware of. So that's something that is important. Changing, there was the issue of multiple space, use of space, maybe that needs to gain a bit of importance in research thinking. Any more ideas of what and how should research innovation, literacy change or evolve to capture what is coming and that seems to be quite serious and significant, let's say? Is it really business as usual, like what I hear a bit from Rémi? Clearly not. There was some elements there. So if each of you could say or give a very practical examples, suggestions on it needs to change like this, or this is a way to move forward. We can start, Manuel, if you have a great idea, or you can give it to Xenia.
No, I don't have a great idea, but Xenia was talking about what will happen when we start harvesting deep sea, etc., or mining deep sea. And obviously, it's the environmental impact assessment issue is being discussed in link with high seas. And so it's interesting to see the role that scientists can play. There's a good example, if you think of international waters, which is the Antarctic. So we can look at the example of the Antarctic to see how we could manage other areas. And now there's a sad news. Like many other regional or thematic conventions, there are difficulties with some of the Antarctic-related mechanisms, the Kalmar and others, because some countries do not want to work multilaterally anymore or in the same way they did in the past tens of years. So all that is related, but we can look at what has been successful and use these good examples.
Remy.
Yeah, thanks. It's a very tough question. I think the topics of research are changing and will change even further, but I don't think research needs to change fundamentally. What I love about researchers is because we, like I said, we have both in the association. We have the business community and we have the research community, and they're very futuristically oriented. Like they have no fear in going in search for stuff that nobody else thinks is relevant right now, or nobody else thinks is ever going to work, etc., etc. And we've seen in the last 15 years with the development of renewables that they were right at the beginning, that there was a market there was an opportunity. So I don't think this needs to change, and I think the research community has everything it takes to drive this. Maybe, yeah, it's more about the topics, obviously, and then there is one key point that we've struggled with because we're trying to get money to get machines in the water on a regular basis, and this is a problem for the entire sector at the moment. And what we hear back from decision makers is always, well, how much money is it going to cost? How long before I see returns? How long before I see machines? I've been elected for 5 years. I'm giving you money now, I want results tomorrow, etc., etc. And maybe there is one thinking around best use of public money that is interesting, and we've developed alongside with DG Mare, it was launched by Commissioner Vella 4 years ago, a roadmap from the Ocean Energy Forum, which suggests one solution to maybe emphasize the good use of public money, which is called the phase gate process, which is basically a funnel process by which you fund very early stage research at the beginning, and you spread it, you sprinkle it around a bit, so you have enough research that is being done on a number of topics, but then you ask for deliverables that are the condition for the next phase of the research to be done, and progressively the people who deliver the deliverables go to the next phase and get a bit more money to go from TRL 1.4 to TRL 4.5 and then 5.6, etc., etc., and you end up with research that is basically more cheaply funded with similar results. So maybe it's more in that direction that there is a thought process to be had. But great job to researchers.
Ian?
Oh, I agree with Remy, of course. But I think we need to think, instead of how do we protect the oceans, I'd like to see more emphasis on how do we make Europe a leader for the decarbonisation of the planet's economy for the next 20, 30 years.
Kenya?
Concerning the deep sea mining, here I can read some of the results of the different workshops, and one of them was to increase awareness in the use of raw materials and their importance to our society, like we have done with the plastics that started, and now everyone is aware of what is happening in the ocean. The same kind of initiative has been suggested here to increase awareness and public engagement in the use of the raw materials that would come eventually out of the deep sea mining. Another one, which is interesting, is that to invest in research and to understand the impacts or the possible impacts of the deep sea mining. And the last one is that the governance from international bodies, where on one hand they are supposed to setting up the regulations, and on the other hand they are giving licenses to private companies to go ahead and start mining. So the participants were asking for this governance on that, in this respect here.
Many thanks. Many thanks for source of inspiration. We need to digest a bit, I think, some of the elements that are here. We need to see how we link it also to what was discussed in the previous plenary, in particular in how it might affect what we do individually, collectively. I suggest we slowly close down this a bit long afternoon and get to some more enjoyable time where you can discuss bilaterally or in small groups about many of the issues we touched upon today. Thanks for Xenia, Jan, Remy and Manuel to have shared things with us. Yeah.
I would like to close with one comment, if I may. Coming from the business world, I've been struggling with the RRI, and I've been working for years between, with two legs, like one on the research side and one on the business world, or trying to get into the policy. One way of looking at RRI is to look at it as a economic and quality assurance system. It's a system. It can be used as a system by companies. Once we start explaining to them that we have been hearing about marketeers, to use marketeers and communicators, but if we start explaining to them that RRI can open the doors for them to understand their customers, their end users that they don't know because they are doing only small focus groups. If they start understanding this, they will be much open to use RRI as a quality assurance system for their future products. Thank you.
If you could clap to thank the panel. I think I'm going to cut things short a bit. There is our two guest stars, Fernando and Olga. I would suggest that they will welcome you on the cocktail dinner. You will see the young professional part and people that have worked in parallel to us. It's a source of inspiration, is also a way to practically start doing business differently and giving space to people that we often consider a bit as end users of our knowledge and put them back at the same table that what we are doing ourselves. So please, thanks to all of you to stay up to the end. If you go out and if you see that what Delphine has drawn needs to be complemented and enriched, just do it and enjoy the end of the evening here with us. Thank you very much.